talk too long today, I'll be watching my phone. Somebody in the back wants to wave their hands at me and do this. That's fine. Been a difficult week for some of us, and certainly one for me. And I haven't really had time to do a lot of sermon preparation this week, and I finally got around to it this morning early. And the way I got around to it this morning early was I woke up, and as I normally do on every day of the week, is I read from Henry Nouwen, who was a Dutch priest who died about 25 years ago on Tuesday. And so I always find something inspiring from Henry Nouwen, and certainly I did this morning as well. And it reminds me a little bit about what I felt like this week, where I was going through a period of time with all these unconnected events happening, and later recognizing sort of a deep connection through all of those events to people in my life and in my former life. And so when I woke up this morning and read Henry Nouwen, here's what it said, as a quote from him. Death is a part of a much greater and much deeper event, the fullness of which we cannot comprehend, but of which we know that it is a life-bringing event. What seemed to be the end proved to be the beginning. What seemed to be a cause for fear proved to be a cause for courage. What seemed to be defeat proved to be victory, and what seemed to be the basis for despair proved to be the basis for hope. Suddenly a wall becomes a gate. And although we are not able to say with much clarity or precision what lies beyond the gate, the tone of all that we do and say on our way to the gate changes drastically. So what seemed like some walls this week sort of became some gates as I thought about them further. And as I guess most of you know from having read the parish emails, I started feeling like crap Sunday evening, and couldn't sleep, and I began to sweat and have fever. Long story short, I decided I need to get tested for COVID. Called my older brother, who's a doc, a internal medicine doc in Texas, and he said, yeah, you need to go get tested. So I got tested Monday afternoon, and it was positive. And so I began to think through what it was needed to be done, because we have a lot going on in the parish. There was a funeral that I was to do yesterday afternoon. Good part of the story is I got to do it. It was for the Heibel family who was Bob Heibel, the priest here for 31 years, back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And there was a lot going on, and I needed to try to shift gears into making things happen. So I began talking to the people that I needed to talk to get everything to happen. And one of the first ones I called was Mary, because I said, Mary, if I don't get to do this funeral on Saturday, can you do it? There was a long pause. And she said, Mike, I told you I'd do whatever you did, so I'll do it. So Mary, thank you for that. It took a load off of me. And then began to call and let people know that I needed to let them know who I thought I might have been exposed to. Called Karen, our senior warden, and began discussing things with the vestry, how we should do this without freaking the parish out, and all of those things. So we went through the week doing that. But also I read this very last line from the letter of James. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. So I had a chance to think about that all week long. And as I began to think about it, I thought, you just need to pray. You just need to be present and take in whatever happens. And you got people around you doing the work of the parish, doing things that need to be done. And so I called my friend Hal Rourke over in Granite Springs. He and I had a beer together on Sunday evening. And I thought, oh my gosh, I wonder if I had exposed him. I also thought about Karen, with whom I had lunch last Sunday, and I thought, oh my God, I wonder if I'd exposed her. So there was a lot going on, and so I just kept trying to do what I could do. When I called Hal, he said, why don't we just get on the phone together or get on Zoom together and work on our Episcopal Futures project? And I thought, that's great, I can do that from home. he wanted to get tested also. He got tested, he was negative. So the work week kind of went on. And one of the things I was really concerned about was the Heibel family, because I'd gotten to know the 4 Heibel kids pretty well over the course of the past 3 weeks in doing the planning for their service. Three guys and a woman who grew up at the same time I did in the 60s. And it made me think back to growing up in the 60s. I had a very good friend who was the PK, the preacher's kid, in my church. His name was David. And so there were 3 boys in his family and a girl. In my family, there were 3 boys and a girl. We all sort of fit together in ages. And the Heibels sort of fit together in those ages too. So I kept figuring out what to make of all that. And so eventually got through the week, did the planning we needed to do, the vestry got on it, and we made things sort of fit together and try to keep things calm, but also let everybody know what was going on, which all results in you having masks on today. I'm sorry about that, it's because of me. I apologize. But anyway, we started to work, and things started clicking. I knew that I wasn't going to have any answers until at least Thursday, because I thought back to the time when I felt like I had been exposed, and I believed that if I tested on Thursday afternoon again, I would probably be negative. Turns out I was, but I didn't want to rely on one test, so I scheduled one for Friday morning. It was a rapid test, and it was negative. But I also wanted to schedule one that took 24 to 36 hours because they're more reliable. Turns out I learned last night that it was negative. Printed out the results and pasted them on the wall. If you guys want to walk down and see for yourselves. But sort of the gates began to open. Doors that seemed like they had closed, and I was wondering how it would affect us, how it would affect our parish. I was so happy last Sunday because we had 63 total in our 2 services, which is our high point in numbers of people ever since COVID began. And then when I started feeling badly and came down with a positive test, I thought, oh my God, we're going to lose this momentum. Well, we didn't. There's not quite as many here today as there were last week, but we're still doing really well. By the way, every other parish around us is wearing masks too, so it's probably not a bad thing. But the family came for the Heibel funeral, and I met with them at noon on Friday to get everything ready and set up. The funeral was yesterday at 2 o'clock, but I met one of the kids that I had not met before. So there was the 3 boys and the girl, Matthew, Mark, and Paul. I wonder where those names came from. And then a Jim. And I don't know where that came from, but there's a Jim. So we had a really good time talking together, but I didn't want to meet with them face to face until I had tested negative twice. So everything got set up, everything was beautiful. It was wonderful having people that knew the Heibels here from decades ago, and they felt very comforted by that. And one of them told me a story about how he rang the bell on Sundays. And the rope for the bell used to come all the way down into the narthex there, because the organ that we now have was not there. But the organ made it where we couldn't have the rope all the way down. So Matt Heibel was telling me about how he would ring the bells on Sunday. He was so small that he would go up off the floor with the bell when it went up. And it was fun listening to that and listening to the stories of the kids talking about playing wiffle ball out here, which reminded me of my days younger when I was with my PK friend, preacher's kid friend, David, playing wiffle ball in his yard. So there's just all these stories coming back, and I was wondering how to fit them all together. And so after I met with the Heibels on Friday, I have not seen or heard from my friend David ever since the 8th grade when they moved way down to South Texas, so I never got to see him again until my dad's funeral in 1985. And David showed up at the funeral, and he says, "Do you remember me?" And I said, "Yeah, I remember you. We grew up together, and we vowed to stay in touch with each other That was at a time when cell phones weren't prevalent yet, so we just didn't stay in touch, even though we had promised to. And I didn't see him again until 6 years ago at my brother's funeral, and he showed up again. And he said, "Do you remember me?" And I said, "Yes, I do." So he gave me his card, we talked for a little while, we vowed again to stay in touch with each other, but yet, despite our best intentions, we didn't. So having been here with the Hybels, David's name came to my mind again. So I texted him. I still had his number from the card that he gave me 6 years ago. And I texted him and I called him, left a text, I didn't get a response. I left a call, left a voicemail. I heard from him last night. And he called me and said, "Hey, how are you? How are things going?" And I told him how I was doing. We talked about how he was doing. And we had a chance to just go over childhood memories. The same kind of childhood memories that I went over with the Hybels. And I realized what a connection the Hybels had to this parish, and what a connection that we all are having here together as we're going through this time of uncertainty for all of us. And how the Hybels felt so at home being here, even though they hadn't been at home here for many years, but they lived in that house over there for 30 years. And many of you that were here then have memories of how that was. And they told memories of driving their bikes up and down Route 100 when it was dark and no cars. That doesn't happen anymore. So, it really taught me something, and it made me think about a song that Paul Hybel and I decided he would play on his speaker here as people were coming in the church, and it's Leonard Cohen's "Hallelujah." You probably all have heard it, and he loved it. He said his mom loved it, and it was her funeral, so he decided to play it. And he really appreciated, that suggestion. It was something that I had suggested in one of our planning sessions. And so everybody kind of perked up that was coming in the door and listened to the song. And then the image of little Matt ringing the bell came back, and it reminded me of a poem that Leonard Cohen wrote that said, "Ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in." And I thought of that last night as I was going to sleep, and when I woke up this morning and read from Henry Nouwen, I thought it all over again. That we don't know where the walls are, we don't know where the gates are going to happen, or where the doors will close, or where the doors will open, but everything seems to fit together sometime. You may remember the last couple of months I've been saying sort of a different offertory, which is, I say, draw near to the Lord and your prayer will be heard. And it really rings true when we read together from James. And the letter of James is the very same thing. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. It's all about prayer. And when we're in times of distress or anguish or angst or turmoil, things are swirling around us, we don't know what to do, we have people that are close to us that we can call on and that love us and whom we love back that we can call on. And that letter of James is so true. And that song by Leonard Cohen and that poem by Leonard Cohen are so true. Ring the bells that can ring, and forget your perfect offering. There's no such thing as a perfect offering. But that's where the light gets in the cracks, in the places that we were broken, in the hole through the floor back there where the rope came down, and little Matt was swinging on it, and the bells were ringing. And he rang them again yesterday, by the way, because it made him feel comfortable. And at the end of the funeral yesterday for his mom, we also buried his dad's ashes out there. And they came in a paint can that had been buried in the cemetery up there 20 years ago, I guess. And the can was all rusted. And so Paul, one of the sons, brought the can, and he said, "Can we put Dad in there with Mom?" And I said, "Yeah, let's do that." Well, we had already finished the service. I said, "I'll make something up." So he brought the can, and I said, "Let's all gather again with the family and friends." And we gathered out in the columbarium, and he brought me the can. And as he handed me the can, I held it over the grave. The bottom of the can was rusted out and dropped, and all of the ashes fell right on top of the cake. And so I made up something about butterflies. It probably came from somewhere, I don't know. And it was, I think, moving for everyone. And I didn't go to bed worrying about what I was going to say today, because I knew that the bells would be ringing. I knew that the tracks would turn into something new, and I knew that the gates would open. So here we are, and I've tested negative for COVID 3 times. That's the open gate. I'm going to keep walking through it, and I think it'll still be good. I desperately hope that none of you have gotten exposed to it because of me. We had our vestry meeting Tuesday night a week ago, right after the time, shortly after the time that I think I may have been exposed. We had that vestry meeting in person for the first time since COVID. And then I discovered this in our Zoom vestry meeting, last Tuesday night, which was sort of an emergency meeting to figure out how we were going to do all these communications. Karen was sitting across from me at that vestry meeting that we had a couple of weeks ago. Regina was sitting next to me on this side. Who was sitting on the other side of me? Karen, do you remember? Michelle. Michelle was sitting. So I was looking at them on the Zoom screen. I know what they were thinking. I know what they were thinking. Oh my God. So, of course, they all went out and got tested. And so far, everybody that's tested has tested negative. And I feel confident that's all because we have done what we should do. We've all been vaccinated, kept our masks on all the time we should. Now we're keeping them all on again for a while until we can get to this. But I appreciate all of your support this past week. It was difficult for 24 hours, and then it got better each of the days that it went along. And it shows me something that you're all here. And that you trust your vestry, you trust me, you trust each other to take care of each other, and for all of us to take care of each other. So let's ring those bells. It's still can ring. Let us stand and affirm our faith.